So many years out, it is difficult not to think of the Madeleine McCann case and not see an industry. I don't say this to be incendiary or insensitive. An estimated 13 million euros of UK taxpayer money has gone into the investigation, but that probably pales in comparison to the amount of money generated for private enterprises. Madeleine McCann's name sells papers. Madeleine McCann's name gets clicks. Madeleine McCann's name, whether attached to a high-profile documentary or slapped on the cover of a book, is worth a fortune. It is surprisingly easy to forget about the night when it all started, when 3-year-old Maddie was allegedly snatched out of a hotel room in Portugal and seemed to disappear into the night. Blame scattered everywhere, towards the parents and towards Portuguese investigators, always fanned by the tabloid machine. But this video is not about that chilling night in 2007. Now, it is incredibly likely you're aware of the most important details. While Madeleine McCann remains missing, while many have taken a step back from following one of the most well-discussed true crime cases of the century, a lot has happened. We'll be looking at some of the twists in the case and its high-profile nature in the last 5 years, covering everything from an ongoing trial to botched leads and chasing deceased suspects, to the strange phenomena of individuals coming forward claiming to be Maddie. It is perhaps best to start with when Madeleine McCann's disappearance became an event once more. From the moment Netflix announced a new docuseries covering the case, there was trouble. It started with the parents' public statement following Netflix's announcement, saying that they were concerned that the high-profile doc might disrupt ongoing investigations. At the time, 2019, police were following a specific suspect. The documentary had no value, they claimed, and considering the investigation was more active than it had been in years, it's hard not to see their side. The parents made a few more public statements regarding the slated release, reiterating that they were not involved in any capacity. There were also simmering feelings about its inclusion of testimony from Goncalo Amaral, a figure we will most definitely get into soon. Netflix pushed forward, even with the documentary being delayed numerous times. Although they're famously tight-lipped about budgets for their originals, one episode is all it takes to form an impression of the series. Ostentatious drone shots linger for what feels like minutes at a time. Dozens of interviews are conducted across Europe. Slow-mo and flashy scene transitions blur the line between fiction and harsh reality. For Netflix, it was the closest thing to a reckoning it had ever floundered into in the arena of true crime. The Guardian called the whole thing a moral failure, focusing on its insistence to place style over substance. And why wouldn't it? It was clear that there was nothing that could be added at that point except a dime in Netflix's pocket. From Lucy Mangan's 1-star review, it was a blatant cash-in on the vogue for the true crime series that had become a staple of Netflix's output since the success of Making a Murderer a few years ago, but without any of the justifications previous works in the genre have provided. It was not the disinterment of a forgotten case. It was not the re-examination of a suspected miscarriage of justice. It offered no new facts, no new insight. It didn't even have a point of view. It was by far one of the most telling examples of Netflix being bad at producing ethical true crime. If such a thing exists. A Madeleine documentary would be brought up in similar conversations about Netflix's Tiger King and their vapid venture into the death of Elisa Lam. Of course, the parents being against the documentary didn't exactly help their case in the court of public opinion. Within days of Madeleine McCann's disappearance, their role has been a cornerstone of discussion. Many were immediately suspicious that they were at the very least negligent for leaving their children in a hotel room unsupervised for long stretches at a time. That they were careless at best is not an uncommon perspective, but some push it even further, such as Goncalo Amaral, who was the lead investigator on the case at the first call. When the former Portuguese detective retired and published a 2008 book suggesting the parents were involved, tabloids practically printed money. What has come of this infamous accusation? Well, as recently as 2023, the European Court of Human Rights ruled against Kate and Jerry McCann in their libel case against Amaral. This ruling supported earlier decisions by Portuguese courts, which had found that Amaral's book did not infringe upon the McCann's personal rights, not to say any of it had been cut and dry a process. In fact, in 2015, Portuguese court initially ruled in favor of the McCanns, awarding them damages. However, this decision was overturned in 2016 by an appeals court, which stated that Amaral's claims were protected under free speech. The McCanns then took the case to Portugal's Supreme Court, which upheld the appeals court's decision in 2017. The ECHR's 2023 decision effectively ends the McCanns' legal avenues for challenging Amaral's book through the courts. This ruling is significant as it underscores the strong protections for freedom of expression under European law, even in cases involving sensitive and potentially harmful allegations. The ESCHR emphasized that the national courts had carefully considered the context and content of Amaral's statements and found that they fell within the bounds of permissible commentary on a matter of public interest. While Amaral's book is essential reading for anyone interested in the case, with deeply provocative claims, 2023 also brought with it an in-person apology from Portuguese authorities, delivered by a delegation meeting with Jerry McCann. Not only did they express regret for critical errors made in the investigation, like poorly securing the crime scene at the outset of the investigation, but also forever publicly naming the McCann parents as suspects. A lot has clearly happened behind the scenes, so much so that it can feel frustrating that Madeleine McCann remains missing. That is, of course, until someone comes forward claiming to be her. Social media can be a lightning rod for misinformation, and Madeleine McCann's case has always been plagued by poor faith by certain members of the public. In 2023, it was at Am Madeleine McCann that seemed to introduce Gen Z to the case proper, including its tendency to go off the rails. Let's start at the beginning. Julia Faustina, who also goes by Julia Wandelt, started the Instagram account and posted a video, which quickly became a viral firestorm there and on TikTok. Faustina, a Polish national, claimed that she was not related to her parents and believed she had striking similarities to Madeleine after doing some research. Among the reasons she believed this to be the case were gaps in her early childhood memory and a distinctive abnormality in the iris that both her and Madeleine have, even in sketches that try and account for likely changes in Madeleine's appearance as the years go by. The keyhole-shaped iris has always been a distinctive characteristic. More than 1 million followers and a Dr. Phil appearance later, Faustina remained steadfast against detractors, saying that she had reached out to police in both Poland and the UK, but they didn't take her suspicions seriously. Social media was a last resort, she claimed. Celebrity psychic Dr. Fia Johansson represented Faustina through the media frenzy, which probably didn't help skepticism. In the end, DNA results were conclusive, if not damning. Faustina was left to apologize after testing showed her Polish roots being too strong to conceivably be a match with Madeleine McCann. She made a public statement apologizing for the pain she might have caused for the parents. She then returned to Poland after her phone was seized by US authorities, claiming to have found inappropriate images of minors, which has since hampered any hope she might have had about disappearing from public view entirely. This is neither the first nor likely the last time someone comes forward and claim themselves to be Maddy. Sometimes they recant their statements, as is the case of a TikToker who claimed they were simply joking in poor taste after making numerous statements. Others, like a homeless Swedish girl in Italy who bore superficial resemblances to Maddy, took other parties intervening to disprove the suggestions. Before moving on, it's perhaps pertinent to quickly mention the eponymous Tapas 7, as the media called them, refers to 7 friends of the McCann parents, the name deriving from them all being gathered at the Hotel Tapas bar and taking shifts to check on Maddy and her siblings. Their testimonies on what happened that night were both vital to the initial investigation and subject to plenty of media dissemination. For example, one member claimed seeing a man carrying a child away from the direction of the apartment. That claim was struck down when a separate tourist came forward and claimed it was him carrying his own child. You'll find less and less information about each individual member with each passing year, even as some theorists insist that some, or all, the 7 parents could have been involved in a cover-up scheme along with the McCanns. For their part, none of the 7 were ever publicly named as suspects, and all seem to have returned to private lives in the wake of the media maelstrom their early interviews caused. It's not only individuals claiming to be Maddy that falter and fail. For those even passively following the case, it's been one dead end after the other, and sometimes, very literally. Years after the initial investigation, Euclides Montero, a former employee at the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz, where Madeleine McCann was reported missing, became a prime suspect. Police made this announcement, and it struck the public as out of the blue. For one, Montero had never previously been named as a suspect. For another, he was deceased by the time of the announcement. Montero was placed near the scene on the night Madeleine vanished, thanks to mobile phone records and almost nothing else. Circumstantial evidence and his death 2 years after the disappearance meant that Portuguese authorities never even had the chance to interview him and build up a more convincing case. His widow, Luisa Rodriguez, denied his involvement. Montero's name being raised as a chief suspect wasn't the only time Portuguese authorities caught criticism for their handling of the case, of course, but no individual has ever received as much attention, especially in the last 10 years, as the once mysterious Christian B. While the investigation into Christian Bruckner's potential involvement in Madeleine McCann's disappearance continues, he is currently on trial for crimes unrelated to Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Bruckner has repeatedly claimed that he feels he cannot receive a fair trial due to media attention from the McCann case. To his credit, despicable as his convictions have shown him to be, he might even be correct. As authorities persist in their search for definitive answers, the unrelenting eye of scrutiny that has followed this case perseveres. It has gazed on the parents, the friends, the police in 2 countries. It has looked unfavorably at the media. At times, it has shown us to be consumers of tragedy. And in the ceaseless firestorm, a simple fact remains. Madeleine remains missing, her fate unknown, her years stolen from her, whatever her fate may be. By the time of this video's publishing, Madeleine McCann would be 20 years old.